It's more of, I want to empower. I want for people to excel. I want to make sure parents are resilient so that they can parent their children at full capacity, because I believe that healthy children start with healthy adults in their lives.
Greetings, everyone. Welcome to the podcast, Roots of Healing. I'm your host, Dr. Siri Chand Khalsa. And this week, I couldn't be more excited. I have Dr. Noemi Adame, known as the Veggies Over Pills Doctor. She's a board-certified pediatrician, whole food plant-based home cook, baker, writer, public speaker, and holistic wellness expert. I especially love that she's the owner of Culver Pediatric Center based in Indiana. It's a pediatric center that transforms mind, body, and spirit for the health of children by empowering and educating their families, communities, and schools in holistic nutritional wellness and so many other things as we're going to dive into. Welcome to the podcast, Dr. Adame.
I'm excited to be here.
Yay! So one of the things that I love diving into with my guests, because we have had such interesting clinicians, is tell us a little bit about your educational pathway. And my hope in sharing these stories is to help the younger trainees who may be listening to the podcast understand that the roots of healing, meaning ROOTS or ROUTSES, is there's many pathways that a clinician can create their practice. And in today's world, a lot of the younger clinicians sort of think it's just going to be this linear march from med school, residency, possibly fellowship, into private practice owned by corporate medicine. But there's another way. And so tell us a little bit about how you got to where you are today.
Well, I think the credit for this goes to my mother, who I unfortunately lost in 2023. But I grew up in South Texas. I was the daughter of Mexican immigrants, the firstborn daughter of immigrants. And healthcare for us was a luxury. Going to the doctor, you might as well have told us, go on a first class trip to Paris. Like, that's how luxurious and unattainable it felt. And so my mother treated us at home when we were sick. She treated our sore throats with lime juice and saltwater gargles, digestive illness with ginger and chamomile tea, cuts and bruises with aloe vera, fevers with cool sheet wraps. And my mom would take us to see the doctors either across the border in Mexico or the local AQHC when we got really sick, beyond what she felt she could handle with her knowledge of home remedies. And so as I went through my medical training, I never forgot my mother's remedies and my upbringing. And in medical school, I took a couple of electives on quote unquote alternative medicine. And I say that in quotes and really because we call it alternative when a lot of these healing systems, to use one of the terms you've used before, have been around for much longer than Western medicine has, but yet somehow we call it alternative, right? So when I left, I finished my training. I was a hospitalist for a while, then was in corporate medicine for a while. And when I left corporate medicine and opened up my own concierge pediatric practice, I finally had the freedom and the time to go back to my roots and do additional training in nutrition through the American College of Lifestyle Medicine and on the integrative management of ADHD and autism through the Andrew Weil Institute of Integrative Medicine. And I finally had the time and the freedom to incorporate all of this additional training into my practice. And for my patients, for example, I do recommend saltwater gargles for a sore throat. I do recommend ginger tea for digestive illness. And I feel like I have come full circle in my practice. And I am so grateful for my mother for starting me on that journey.
What is your mom's name?
Lupita.
Lupita. Oh, sending our heartfelt love to you through the holiday season. We're releasing these podcast episodes probably in the new year, but holiday season is always a time
tough.
it's always the remembrance and the honoring that you've brought her voice and her wisdom through. I think that we really don't appreciate the indigenous or regional medicines that have existed through millennia. the
Right.
system that I studied was indigenous and the primary medical system
Mhm.
in India. But we have to recognize, and this is a central tenet in Ayurveda, that there are regional ways that we know of plants, that we know
Right.
of individual genetic, epigenetic kind of patterns. We
Mhm.
think about this contextually in so many different ways. Do you have a sense that your mom carried a lineage from even before her, or how do you think she acquired the knowledge that she had?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Some of her knowledge was passed on through, the Mexican culture is actually a very matriarchal system. So I definitely think there was that component. But the other thing is, even though she did not have formal education, she was a very proud woman, a very intelligent woman. And I remember growing up, she had books. She had all these books about natural healing and home remedies, and she would pour over them. And okay, my child has this, or my or her. I grew up in a multi-generational household. My grandmother lived with us, which was also an incredible experience. And you just don't see that anymore, right? It was such a privilege. So to have that knowledge that spanned two countries and several, really several centuries from the passed down knowledge was incredible. But she also just was voracious about reading and learning.
And I think that this is something that we want to just even give voice to in the
Mhm.
podcast, which is that the kitchen table knowledge, I like to call it,
Mhm.
the kitchen table wisdom, the remedies that happen in the kitchen,
Mhm.
that we're seeing data that says that we are overtreating with antibiotics. And of
Right.
course, this is not to supersede a medical conversation for
Of
the
course not.
listener
Yeah.
with
Yeah.
your clinician, but
Mhm.
there haven't the guidelines even in the pediatric community really shifted to approaching upper respiratory infections not via antibiotic first?
Right. So even like ear infections, if you look at the guidelines, observation for low risk older kids, the American Academy of Pediatrics says, "Hey, it's okay to say, hey, let's hold off. They can get better on their own. Some ear infections can get better on their own. So, with very close follow up, it's okay to give anticipatory guidance and I recommend observation with a safety net that you will follow up very closely. Now, I did not have the option to follow up closely when I was in corporate medicine. Now I do. It's a very different practice model now that I
Right.
am able to like text my families directly. It is a completely different way to practice that I actually have the freedom to be able to do that. So to tell families, hey, let's hold off on the antibiotics. I'll text you in 2 days and see how they're doing. And if things get worse, I'm only a text away or a phone call away.
And that's really incredible. And
Mhm.
this has been a theme that's come up in a lot of these episodes, which is really appreciating and understanding how this differentiation in the model creates so much continuity and
Mhm.
connection, and
Right.
really that the relationship is therapeutic in and of itself. We
Mhm.
often hear patients say, with a certain amount of disdain, "Oh, my doctor X," or they
Mhm.
didn't listen or they
Yeah.
weren't present. But these newer models that give the autonomy back to the clinicians who generally want that time,
Mhm.
that ability to communicate, to pivot, to wake up tomorrow and say, we're going to do a holiday mindfulness walk. And
Yeah.
you put it on your board, and in a week, it's
Yeah.
happening. And
Yeah.
to have that kind of freedom, I just want for the younger clinicians that might be listening, coming back into the podcast to older episodes, even to know that there are clinicians who really said, I'm going to do this differently, and it's going to reflect an area of knowledge that I want to dive into, that I want to become an expert in myself as a generalist. We can have these lanes we develop much deeper in. And I'm really intrigued. What prompted you to go to understand ADHD and autism differently? Was it the frustration at what the options were, the empathy for the parents who felt powerless? Like, where in your career did you start feeling like this is an area I really want to become much more knowledgeable in than what was the first pass from my education.
Right. So, as a concierge doctor, many of the families who come to me, it's because they are looking for something different. And in the way the system is right now, a lot of families with neurodivergent children really feel that they have been, at best, ignored and at worst, harmed by the corporate medical system. With ADHD and autism, it just naturally happened that that my practice that a lot of these patients joined my practice. So I wanted to be able to offer them something different, but that also had value and resulted in good outcomes for them. And so that's why I very, very specifically sought out this additional training.
And although we don't want to replace a diagnostic
Right. Yeah.
process
Mhm.
in our conversation, what are some key features that if a parent is listening that might cue them in if it has I think one of the biggest travesties is, as you said, the harm that may be done
Right.
by
Mhm.
being ostracized in the system, but closely behind that is not knowing that you may have a child who is functioning neurodivergently. Like, I'm curious, what are some cues that you start to see as a pediatrician? And of course, we wouldn't want someone listening to say, well, now I know my XYZ person is
Right.
diagnosed. So we're not
Right.
replacing
Yeah.
the formal diagnostic process. But what are some
Right.
cues?
Yeah. Yeah. Always consult with your doctor first, right?
Yeah.
Of course. So, neurodivergence refers to an umbrella term for any child or person whose brain functions a little bit differently. And again, I'm going to use quotes for differently or not normal, because we have very randomly, as a society, we're using very arbitrary metrics, have decided what's normal or not. But for in simple terms, basically, if their child is struggling either academically, socially, in their relationships with their family, in their interactions with other children, in sleep, in their feeding, anything where the parent feels, okay, this is different than their peers, different if they have other children than my other children. And not only is it different because it's okay to be different, but it is causing them to struggle in their quality of life and their day to day life. Any concern like that, I would definitely encourage parents to go to their pediatrician and start there. I'm a general pediatrician, right? I'm a primary care doc. So I definitely encourage families to start there.
Yeah. And so most pediatricians would have a
Mhm.
pathway they could walk
Yeah.
someone through.
Mhm.
Um, and I think it's important to recognize that sometimes what could be perceived of as a behavioral issue may
Mhm.
be a processing issue or a sensory sensitivity that is
Mhm.
making an individual child more reactive.
Right. Mhm.
What do you think in terms of the way the Western model likes to kind of say it's the body or
Mhm.
the mind, but what do you think about this quality of spirituality in as you're working with kids that are in these, we'll say, containers where they
Mhm.
perhaps function a little differently? Do you bring in conversations around spirituality or inner development that's maybe for the whole system? Like, how do you broach that when you feel like there may be a certain type of growth that the parents might benefit from that would be
Right.
supportive to understanding the special gift that the child may be offering?
When a family joins my practice and also at annual wellness visits, I have my families complete a mind, body, spirit wellness questionnaire where I ask everything about their child. I'm talking, I want to get all up in their business. I ask about what they eat, how they sleep, how often do they pee, how often do they poop, How often does the family read together? How are they doing in school? And again, there's no way I could have been able to do this in corporate medicine. And so one of the sections of this questionnaire is on spiritual health. And I very specifically mentioned in that section, this section is focused on the spirit, and spiritual wellness refers to finding meaning and purpose in life and living in accordance to your values, morals, and beliefs. Spiritual health is about finding inner peace. And I ask about the role of faith, religion, and spirituality in the family's life. And I mentioned that at Culver Peds, we welcome and support families of all faiths, all religions, all philosophies, including our atheist and agnostic families. I live in rural Indiana, so it is important to make sure that families that are not part of the local religious majority feel safe and welcome. And I also ask about the times that the family spends together. How often does the child spend time outside? I ask about their interests in creative activities like drawing and music, the ways that the family or the child are involved in their community. I ask about whether they'd be interested in learning about earthing, which is literally the act of touching the earth with our bare skin, which has very powerful health properties. And so based on their responses in that questionnaire at that appointment, I can then start a conversation about spiritual health and well-being, specifically tailored for that patient and their family.
Wow, that is so novel, right? Did you get any in your training? Did you have any guidelines or any instruction in terms of spiritual health? First of all, I love your definition. I love that it's in your questionnaire.
Mhm.
And I'm curious, like, how did you come to the place of offering that and incorporating that? Was it something you saw was sort of this missing limb almost from the evaluation? And then when you would treat it and look at it and explore it, that it opened up healing in a way that maybe you couldn't see in other ways?
Right. Yes. So I went to medical school at UTMB in Galveston, and it was actually pretty progressive, especially at the time, the late '90s, early 2000s, and we did have some coursework on spiritual health and how to ask and how to bring it up. It was also addressed in some of these alternative medicine classes that I took, and it was just something I've always been interested about. I'm not, I don't ascribe to a certain religion, but I definitely am very interested in learning about the role of spirituality in all of my patients' lives because it is so important to them and can have some meaningful impact on their health. But yeah, when I set about to devise this questionnaire, I very specifically wanted to include spirituality because it is such an important component of our patients' lives.
And I think, what have you seen with that? Like, do families sort of,
Mhm.
are they sometimes surprised that you're asking?
I think so. I think so. And I have the range of, yeah, no, this isn't something that is or when it comes to like religion or going to church or spirituality, some families are like, yeah, that's not a big part of my life, but they do. That questionnaire also includes things like how they're involved in their community, and so these families will then go on about how they volunteer, how they help out at shelters, how they help others that are less fortunate. And to me, that's community, that's spiritual health also. And then there's some families that religion plays a very important part of their life. So I'm so fortunate to have a glimpse into into my families, and that they trust me enough to share this with me.
There's such an interesting idea that I don't hear used enough, which is the
Mhm.
therapeutic relationship that
Right.
comes, this quality that the time spent with you is in and of itself therapeutic, independent of
I
what's talked about,
agree.
and in providing safety,
Mhm.
co-regulation, allowing
Right.
even cadence, allowing curiosity, exploration, vulnerability. These are
Mhm.
traits that are not necessarily, perhaps even in your location,
Right.
what everyone else is seeing as what's valuable to be cultivated. So
Mhm.
in a way, what I love that you're doing as well is creating a philosophy that extends past your clinic, I would imagine, meaning
Right. Yeah,
by
I hope so.
interacting,
I hope
by
so.
interacting with the values that your
Mhm.
clinic has developed and the language that your clinic has developed, your clients come in and recognize like, well,
Mhm.
tolerance is important, compassion is
Yeah,
important, service to others is important.
right,
And that's an interesting piece we don't talk about because so many people are in someone else's model.
right.
So many, I don't even know the number at this point, and I think it's such a primary driver of burnout. When
Mhm,
you have this creativity and ingenuity and
mhm.
maybe you wanna be a leader in your own way, in your community, but your practice the way your practice is structured, it's just like head against the wall. It's just purely
Right.
frustrating, but
Oh,
there's
I
enough.
felt it. Yeah, in corporate medicine, I lasted 5 years, and I don't know how I did. I thrived in the academic world, but in the corporate medicine and that's because I went from being a hospitalist to outpatient, and so I, of course, was very cocky and thought, "Oh, of course, I can do this," but I felt morally injured, and it wasn't the complexity. I was taking care of much more complex patients as a hospitalist, but it was that you have 5 minutes, you have 10 minutes, you have 15
Right.
minutes to see a patient, and that was so morally injurious, so devastating. I was just not built for it. I was not built for it at all.
Do you have a particular moment in time where you just said, "Okay," was it more gradual? Sometimes I like to hear the origin story of the new
Yeah.
practice.
I don't know if there was a specific moment, but I was one of those that I had the proverbial I was in the parking lot with my hands clutching the steering wheel going in near tears going, "I can't go in. I cannot go in. I don't want to."
Right.
But I have to. And it's hard to say that because as doctors we're supposed to be tough and we're supposed to be resilient and we're not supposed to be emotional and we're supposed to love our jobs and we're supposed to prioritize other people over us and selfless and but I knew at that point that I either had to leave medicine or do something different because it was not sustainable to feel that way
That
because
that
I I didn't just hate the doctor and I mean, I don't use the H word lightly. I hated the doctor that I had become, but I also hated the person that I had become, and it was not a good feeling. It was not a good space to be in.
yeah.
I'm much
It's
happier now.
yes, well, it's so clear in your
Yeah.
smile and in your sharing about your practice, but I
Yeah.
think it's good to normalize because
Yeah.
it isn't so easy
Mhm.
or even really practical to come right out of residency into a private practice like
Mhm.
what you've done. Now, maybe if someone came to work with
I am
you,
very grateful for the learning that I did both as definitely as a hospitalist and in corporate medicine. Yeah,
yeah,
of course I am. Yeah.
but that white knuckling and that feeling of just really, I can't speak for you, but just despair.
Oh,
Like,
yeah.
is this what it is?
Yeah.
And and then the reconciliation of what's going to have to be let go
Yeah.
to make this new thing possible. Now,
Mhm.
it's like a birth. Once you're through the birth, you can largely forget.
So you either have to stop caring
Yeah.
or leave.
Yeah.
I basically I arrived at that conclusion. It's either I just stop caring that I am spending 10, 15 minutes with patients and when they tell me, "Oh, by the way," I tell them, you need to go schedule another appointment because I don't have time to answer your questions." And yep, you have to come back and yes, it is another copay and yes, you do have to wait for an hour to see me for 10, 15 minutes and not and stop caring about that or leave and do something.
Yeah. I think that, in the climate that we're in now, where there are more prominent discussions around how medical care is being
Mhm.
delivered, we
Yeah.
want to be cognizant that a lot of clinicians are sort of stuck. There's this quality of like, I don't want to care, but I
Yeah.
do still care,
To protect
but I
yourself.
don't have the energy to go out on my own, or I don't have the resource, or whatever the limiting pieces are. And I just so admire the clinicians that are just saying, look, you can do it. It can be done. Here's a model. You check
Right.
out my website, see how I'm
Mhm.
doing it, follow along my social media. There are ways to get the word out, to have cash pay or direct primary care
Right.
practices that
Yeah.
are successful and aren't going to make it so you can't pay your loan back or have money to live on. There's so
Right,
many fears
right,
that come up
right,
when
yeah,
people feel so stuck inside. I'm
right.
curious, when in the midst of that did you really dive into the culinary pieces and lifestyle medicine? Was that part of your own self-healing, or was that really just you made that change, took a little
Right.
time, and then dove into all the things you wanted to have incorporated?
I think there is definitely a parallel between my personal journey and my professional journey. I became an ethical vegan in 2018. I'd been a vegetarian since 2004 when I was a resident. And then in 2018, my daughter became an ethical vegan. And I had, throughout my journey as a vegetarian, I knew that that's where I was headed. It was just making the jump I felt was going to be a little difficult. So when my daughter became a vegan, I said, okay, that's it. That's my cue right there. She was 16 at the time. And so I joined her in becoming both of us becoming vegan. And I was a vegan who still ate a lot of processed foods around that time, through just my own professional education as well as my own, personal journey. I transitioned from a vegan who still ate processed foods to whole foods plant-based, and I noticed a dramatic improvement on my own physical and cognitive health. I had more energy. I had less brain fog. I used to have word finding difficulty, which was very scary, and I saw a big improvement on that. At that point, I felt that I would be irresponsible as a physician not to share that with my own patients. And when our patients make the transition to whole foods plant-based, the first thing they notice is the impact on their gut health. Within days, patients will either tell me or Nurse Becca, who works with me, she's our nurse educator, that their child is no longer constipated. Or they'll say, wow, they used to spend half an hour on the toilet to poop and now they're in and out. So they also notice an improvement in emotional regulation, improved sleep. And there's several reasons for it. First of all, they're consuming less toxins like dyes, which of course reduces chronic inflammation. And the brain is a particularly vulnerable organ to inflammation. And second, the high protein and high fiber content of this type of nourishment stabilizes blood sugar levels, which prevents sugar crashes that can negatively impact behavior. And then third, high protein, high fiber, anti-inflammatory nourishment promotes a healthy microbiome, and that improves gut integrity and reduces gut permeability, which also reduces chronic inflammation. So yeah, it started personal, filtered over to my professional life, and at that point, I felt like I would be irresponsible not to share this knowledge and this information with my patients.
I love that. And I love that you have done that deep dive.
Hmm.
Just to circle back, because I get this question asked all the time and I have a way I answer it, but I'd love to hear your answer.
Yeah, sure.
What do you think is the difference between the diet construction
Uh,
for an ethical vegan and whole food plant-based person? Is there a philosophic difference? I know you know it, but
yeah.
what's the philosophic difference and
Mhm,
what might be the difference that people would see in the diet?
mhm.
And could one be both? Which I
Yeah.
think,
Yeah, I think so. So, veganism is a lifestyle. It is an ethical way of living. It's someone who does not consume or wear or basically utilize anything where a animal is harmed. So it's not just the foods that we eat, but also like the clothes we wear, the products that we put on our bodies, our shampoos, our makeup, our all of that, right? And it is impossible, right, to 100% live that way. But any time where you have a choice and an option, vegans choose the option where an animal was not um, uh, or killed. So that's what veganism is. Whereas whole foods plant-based refers to specifically nourishment, nutrition, what goes on our plate. And there is a lot of overlap. And veganism really doesn't have a lot to do with health. You can be a vegan and eat French fries and Oreo cookies, which Oreo cookies are accidentally vegan. And there's also, especially now, when I first became vegan, there was like no options for like vegan cheeses or vegan meats or vegan milks. And now there is. Now they make vegan ice cream and vegan, so it's all these products that are vegan, but that doesn't mean that they're necessarily healthy. Whereas whole food plant-based refers to consuming foods that are minimally processed, Probably one of the biggest examples is ethical vegans don't consume honey, but most people that are whole foods plant-based will consume honey because they don't have an ethical aversion to consuming honey. So that's one thing. And then another difference would be like a ethical vegan would eat, have no problem consuming, for example, a vegan chicken nugget, right? That's processed, whereas somebody who's whole food plant-based probably would limit themselves to those type of things. And this is, I hope I'm not sounding judgmental, because, oh my goodness, I like to have a vegan burger every once in a while, and I do like vegan ice cream, but I would say for me, 90% whole foods plant-based and 10% vegan that, I do want an Impossible Burger. And sometimes I do want a vegan donut, and when I do, I don't feel guilty. I don't feel bad about it. I enjoy it because to me, food is not just nourishment. It's also joy and pleasure and sharing with others.
Yeah, I love that. And I think that all the thoughts we have about food create so much internal turmoil.
Yeah.
But just to, for the listeners to understand that vegan may not always be as healthy, but a
Right. Yeah.
vegan could technically, and in some cases, are primarily eating whole food plant-based.
Mhm.
So, it's a sort of word salad for the
Yeah.
pun a little bit. But I get asked that question a lot. What's the difference between these different perspectives? And I think it's so good to make that distinguishment that if someone is saying I am an ethical vegan, it really translates into lifestyle and may not always have the lens towards whole food
Right.
plant-based
Yeah. That's
because,
not the priority. Mhm.
and some of them, obviously as clinicians, we want to have a certain permissibility, but some
Yeah.
of those foods are not health promoting, unfortunately. And if people are subsisting on them, like impossibles every day, and I love impossible. So
Oh,
yeah, I'm with
yes.
you on that. But we want to just make that distinction when people
Yeah.
say, oh, but I went vegan. Why am I not healthy?
Why is my
It's
cholesterol still elevated? Yeah.
yeah, exactly. That maybe it has to do with the fact that the primary health benefits that we see come from these whole grains,
Yeah.
fibers
Yeah.
that are in legumes,
Mhm.
fresh, all the phytonutrients that are in fresh vegetables,
Right.
spices, that
Yeah.
it's not as much high glycemic index,
Right.
gluten-free vegan
Yeah.
cookies and things of that
Yeah.
nature, that this pro health promoting qualities of the whole food plant-based really have to do with the plant
Mhm.
not being processed and in its whole
Right.
form. And which
Intact.
intact,
And your
exactly.
great grandmother will recognize it as food.
Exactly.
Some
So how I'm wondering is, are you bringing any culinary classes to your practice? Have you started or is that
Oh,
coming?
yes.
Tell us
Yeah,
about that.
definitely. So anytime that I give anticipatory guidance to a family, whether it's something as simple as they come in and they have an ear infection or they have strep or UTI, to when they come in for their wellness, I always incorporate nutritional guidance in my anticipatory guidance. We also have more one-on-one with Nurse Becca. She'll sit down with families and do like pantry evaluations and, go over the pantry and also do meal plans that are a lot more one-on-one and personalized with each family. And then we also have some group classes. So we've had nutrition for our kids graduating from high school that are going off to college so that they learn how to make things like a smoothie, some sort of soup, a pasta dish, all whole foods plant-based. So we actually bring them to my kitchen and we teach them. And then Nurse Becca has also runs a program called Camp Veggie, where we've partnered with a group of nuns actually that have some greenhouses, and they've let us use the space. And she teaches kids about where food comes from, our connection between our bodies, our food, the earth. And then she goes over like how to make some whole food plant-based snacks and smoothies. Smoothies are easy with kids, because you're basically just mixing ingredients. So yeah, we definitely incorporate food as medicine into our practice management.
That is, it's just so cool. And
Yeah.
it kind of circles back to, I was thinking about the earlier part of our conversation and understanding that you have a quality of being a community leader and creating sort of philosophies in your community that allow for a different story to be told, a different narrative to be offered. Do you see yourself as a community leader? I'm just curious if that's a label you've given yourself.
Right. That's a very good question. I think that if you were to ask my patients, if you were to ask people in my community, they would say yes. I am the firstborn daughter of immigrants, and so yeah, external validation is my crack. So yes, I do feel like I definitely have that quality of wanting to educate, wanting to empower, but I do approach it from that lens of, it's not that I want to be in charge or tell people what to do. It's more of, I want to empower. I want for people to excel. I want to make sure parents are resilient so that they can parent their children at full capacity, because I believe that healthy children start with healthy adults in their lives. So I think that that's where I view my leadership role, more from a perspective of empowering and teaching and educating, less than, oh yeah, I'm in charge of this. But yeah, that's how I think of it.
That's so cool. Well, I'll be excited to see what kind of comes through as the years go by, because your passion and your energy has to be a little bit contagious. I'm just
I hope
speculating,
so. Yeah.
but I think this is such a welcome energy for people who might feel discouraged or distressed, recognizing that they have more choice in their health span than what has been taught or that they've been given the impression of. I want to talk a little bit about the neurodivergent kids and the
Sure.
ADHD
Mhm.
management,
Yeah.
because this is an area you've really
Mhm.
developed a lot of understanding in. The first question is, and then I just want to let you share a little bit about your practice philosophy, is once you've identified that this is a child has a different processing
Mhm.
capacity, or that's the direction their being exists, what are some of the ways that you explain that to the parent so that the parent can actually create that connection and bond in a different way? And tell me a little bit about how unique you see each of them, meaning probably never the same kid twice in
Right.
terms of
Yeah.
what the next options are. So explain to us a little bit about how intuitively you might think about um, the points that give you the direction you take the assessment recommendations.
Right. So to me, the term holistic means I look at the whole child, their role in their family, their school, their community, and their own journey. Every child is different. So going back to that mind, body, spirit health questionnaire, I incorporate all of those components as part of this veggies over pills approach that I've developed. For example, let's say that I have a child with either ADHD or autism, I'll definitely talk about nourishment in high protein, high fiber, anti-inflammatory nourishment, which is what I call whole foods plant-based because I feel it generates a little bit less of a visceral reaction. Um, and the goal is to, of course, encourage a nourishing pattern that reduces chronic inflammation. I talk to families about physical activity, about restorative sleep, about mindfulness-based stress reduction, avoiding toxins, engaging with nature and natural sunlight, and fostering meaningful social relationships and connections. All those are the pillars of my approach, which I'm sure sound very familiar to you because they're borrowed from the integrative space and the lifestyle medicine space. And all of these pillars have to coexist for optimal mind, body, spirit health, not just in neurodivergent children, but in all children. So when I approach a child with that's neurodivergent, ADHD, or autism, I address all of these pillars, but very specifically to the needs of that child, whether it's they have sensory sensitivities, whether it's attention and focus that's the issue, whether it's emotional dysregulation. I address each of them very individually to make sure that I'm not just applying a cookie cutter approach, but a very personalized approach.
I think it's so interesting because the way the population medicine works is it really wants one size fits all.
Oh, right,
So,
right.
right. And I think, experienced pediatricians would all say it's absolutely never one
Hmm.
size fits all in
Hmm.
when we're looking at children who process differently. But
Yeah.
I think it's so valuable to recognize also the cadence in this, meaning one of the mistakes I made early on in my lifestyle medicine clinical career was here's 100 things to do before our next visit.
Right. Yeah.
You know that if they could do all of them
Small, small.
all
Yeah.
at once, that
Yeah.
life would be so much
Right.
infinitely better for that individual because you know what's going to happen when all those beautiful
Uh-huh.
pillars that you mentioned are
Yeah.
integrated into someone's life.
Right.
But
Yeah.
we learn gently and thoughtfully that it has to be really almost micro changes to
Uh-huh.
be effective and
Baby
sustainable.
steps. Yeah.
Baby steps, exactly. And I think that it's so valuable for our listeners who are both on the clinical side and on the patient side to
Right.
appreciate that when you meet with a clinician who actually has a concierge or DPC style
Mhm.
practice, direct primary care,
Mhm.
you're getting their time, which also means
Right.
their intuition.
Yes.
And when you
Yeah.
get the clinician's intuition, it's an amalgam of applied knowledge and insight, meaning this is not your first rodeo. You
Right.
see a pattern of this is the style of parenting, this is the parenting dilemmas, this is
Right.
how the kid is existing in that system. I
Uh-huh.
know that if I say to this family, do this first, they're never going to do it. But I intuitively know that because I have time to sit and get to know them, that
Right.
this is truly the step that gets the wheel moving. And I'm guessing that's true, but is that your experience?
Oh, yes, for sure. Yeah. I think we definitely, and as doctors, we want to tell people what to do. We want to, okay, here's that prescriptive approach of these are the steps you take. Where with something like this, you have to let the patient arrive at that conclusion themselves. And so I think that for me, very similar to you, a lot of the training that I've done, not just for myself, but we've sent our nurse to do the training through the American College of Lifestyle Medicine, is how to do just that, how to basically become a coach instead of this prescriptive authority of this is how you are going to do things.
Right. And
Mhm.
and I think that that is, if I may, for those of you that are following along in the podcast, this theme is emerging, but it's the matrilineal
Mhm.
knowledge of tend and befriend. It's this quality of bringing people in and creating connection and
Mhm.
understanding that family systems often do contribute to behavioral shifts in the kid.
Mhm.
And it's really not always about that either. There's never an absolute in this, but when the parent has to learn these principles, they themselves may not have access to DPC, internal medicine, or family practice, but they're getting that simultaneous education. And the beautiful thing about these principles is, though there are specifics to portion size and perhaps nutrient focus at
Right.
certain age
Yes. Yes.
developmental,
For sure.
these things are going to apply to them as adults. Like, there's no limit to when in life you can apply these beautiful principles. Yeah. I think, when I think about you in your community, I see this like beautiful lotus
Mhm.
flower rooted in these beautiful traditions of nourishment and compassion. I saw in some coming attractions that you're thinking about developing retreats. And I have to say that I am all in on retreats because it's a wonderful way to get deeper exposure to someone's knowledge base,
Mhm.
to connect in community.
Mhm.
What prompted you to start thinking about hosting retreats? And tell us a little bit about the first one that's coming.
Right. So the first one is February 21st. Registration is open. So if you go to our website, www.coverpediatrics.com, we have a Mind, Body, Spirit events link on our navigation bar. And the first retreat that's coming up is in February. It is a retreat focused on preventing parental burnout for the parents of neurodivergent children. So as a pediatrician, I see firsthand that healthy children start with healthy adults in their lives. Parents cannot pour from an empty cup. And I want healthy, resilient parents so that they can function at full capacity when they're raising their children. Inner growth is so important in preventing burnout, particularly with mindset change. So, in these retreats, we go over how parents can nourish themselves with high protein, high fiber, anti inflammatory nourishment to make sure that their own health is optimized and to prioritize sleep because sleep is the other forgotten vitamin. To prioritize their own health because they need to put their oxygen mask on first before helping others. We go over mindfulness based stress reduction. I tell parents to be stingy with their time, and that no is a complete sentence. We talk about delegating. We talk about embracing imperfection, which in today's social media world, we feel like we have to be perfect all the time. And even communicating with a partner is so important because sometimes we feel like if we ask our partner for help, that we have failed. And it's not that at all. And of course, the other part of the retreat, because I write articles about this on my blog and I write for a local newspaper, I write about this. But what the retreat brings is that building meaningful social connections with other parents that are going through the same thing. One of the big topics of discussion in a lot of our retreats is going to be healing from medical trauma, like we talked about, because so many parents of neurodivergent children and the child too have been harmed by the corporate medical system. And it's not because of the people, it's because of the system. I know I contributed to that harm when I was in corporate medicine because I was not able to practice the way I wanted to. So it's something that nobody ever wants to talk about, but I think a lot of our families do come to us with a great deal of hurt and trauma and distrust. And so our retreats are designed to help parents heal from that harm.
Yeah. Build safety,
Yeah.
let those nervous systems relax, which,
Mhm.
though it's more abstract, actually creates emotional safety in the home, which
Mhm.
helps kids have better emotional regulation, which I think is so, so important.
Right.
I I am excited to hear that you're working on a cookbook. Tell us a
Yeah.
little bit about that. Is this going to be food that's featured at the retreats too?
Yes, I'm hoping to have it done by early next year. So I call it a cookbook, but it's so much more than that. As a pediatrician, I have firsthand expertise on the unique challenges that neurodivergent children face when it comes to nutrition and mealtime. And parents of neurodivergent children, they understand the role that high protein, high fiber, anti inflammatory nourishment plays in their children's cognitive health. I don't have to convince parents that eating fruits and veggies and legumes and less processed foods is healthier for their child. They know that. In fact, that's usually one of the reasons that they come to my clinic is we even have families, we're in Indiana, we have families that travel from Michigan, Illinois, Ohio, and all parts of Indiana for hours to come and see me as their doctor, as their child's doctor, because of this Veggies Over Pills practice philosophy. So these families know the importance of fruits and veggies and whole foods, plant-based nourishment for their child. But nourishing neurodivergent children requires more than simply telling parents, you need to eat more fruits and veggies. There's nuance to this. It involves understanding the individual needs of neurodivergent children, including they may have a lower threshold for environmental toxins, which are also found in food. They may have sensory sensitivities. They may be very routine oriented. So making any changes, it can be very distressing for them. They may experience pre-meal anxiety, restrictive eating patterns. They may have oral motor dysfunction that limits their palate. So I address all these issues in the cookbook. So it's more than just a collection of recipes. It's also a guide to help parents of neurodivergent children find joy in mealtime and food along with their children.
Well, we'll have to have you back on the podcast when the book is ready so that we can dive into that so much more and make sure our listeners have access and top of mind, because I think that's going to be so well thought out. We always just love learning a little bit more about our clinicians that come visit, and different things sort of inform us. And of course, the blue zones and different aspects of regions of the world that have very healthy living. I understand you spent some time in Costa Rica. Tell us a little bit about what is something that really stands out from your experience there that you bring that wasn't what you saw here and that you've really brought into your clinic?
Oh, our carbon footprint was definitely lower. Just the amount of waste that we produced as a family of 4 was just a lot less. So we lived up in a small town up in the mountains, up in the cloud forest called Monteverde. Our children attended school there. That's one of the reasons we moved down there. We wanted our children to experience something different and to learn Spanish. And it was so Monteverde is not a blue zone. The blue zone in Costa Rica is down the coast in the Nicoya Peninsula, but there was still a lot of the things that I've read about blue zones. I definitely saw up in Monteverde, up in that little town. For example, we didn't have a car, so if I needed to go anywhere, we had to walk. When I would go to the grocery store, I would put on a backpack and go or go to the farmer's market, because we actually got most of our produce from the farmer's market. I would buy all the things I needed to buy, put them in that little backpack, and haul them back up the hill to my house. There was also not a lot of options for fast food. There was actually no fast food restaurants in town. There was no cheese was very expensive because the dairy industry doesn't subsidize it like it does here. So eating dairy was actually or cheese was not very common, and people really, it was rice and beans and veggies and seasonal fruits and veggies, and that's what we ate because that's what was available. So being healthy didn't take a lot of effort. Like now, if I want to be active, I have to wake up early, exercise, schedule that into my day. Whereas when you're living in somewhere where you're just walking everywhere, you don't feel like you have to put as much effort into trying to be healthy. It just sort of happens because it's the only choice that you have.
Yeah,
So
I love that.
it was amazing. I also felt it was the only time in our lives where the 4 of us as a family were not in silos, but we interacted with others. So we were friends with the parents of the children that my kids were friends with, which I don't think that's really ever happened any other time in our lives. It was really just in Costa Rica that happened. And I'm not sure why, if it was just because we just had more time or because it was a smaller community. But I definitely miss that part of we just felt more connected to the community than we have anywhere else.
It's so powerful. And it's so valuable to remember all of the way our journey, our healing, our exploration informs how we practice and what we're able to offer through our unique journey. It's like this simultaneous internal healing and discovery
Yeah.
because we can't really offer things that we haven't explored or discovered
Right.
in
Yeah.
ourselves in the same way. We can give it in, lip service is too trivial, but like, we say, hey, do this. But if we haven't really done that work to find our own inner peace, to understand our own value of community and connection, and what the sedentary lifestyle actually,
Yeah.
what's opposite to that? What does it actually look like for a lot of the world that don't have cars or live in
Mhm.
areas where walking is much more the norm?
Mhm.
Well, I want to be so mindful of our time. I'm sure this is your busy day, and I don't want you to get behind in your clinic at all. We could probably go another 45 minutes on
I
all the
know.
topics that we have in common.
Mhm.
Tell us, are you only able to see patients
Mhm.
that come to see you in your clinic right
Mhm.
now? Okay.
Right. So we offer a myriad of services. So we have a robust website, www.coverpediatrics.com. If somebody would like to join our practice, they can sign up for a virtual group info session to meet me and learn more about the practice, about my practice philosophy, to make sure that we are the right practice for their child. We are closed to new patients right now because I want to give my team time to spend with their families for the holidays. We reopened to new patients in the middle of January, and we are honored that we have families that travel from even out of state, like I mentioned, to see us. I'll never take that for granted. But I am licensed in Indiana. I'm also licensed in Ohio, but yes, to establish a doctor-patient relationship, the family does have to come to me. A lot of the follow-up can be done virtually, but early on, I do need to there's so much value in a history and a physical exam, right? So that is an important part of establishing a doctor-patient relationship. But if they want to get to know us a little bit and maybe feel like, okay, I live too far away. It doesn't make sense for Dr. Adame to be my child's pediatrician, but I want to learn more about, I want to gain some access to her knowledge. Then the best way to do that is to join one of our retreats. Like I mentioned, the first one is February 21st on preventing parental burnout. And then we also have a couple of retreats specifically for parents of children affected by PANS and PANDAS, which the American Academy of Pediatrics has finally acknowledged that it actually exists, which is such a great success for a lot of these families that have been harmed again by the corporate medical system. So joining one of our retreats is a great way to get to know us, and of course, following our social media at Culver Peds, we're on Facebook and Instagram, is also a way to get to know us if you want to learn more.
Amazing. And I'm noticing, I just pulled it up here to take a quick
Yeah.
glance at it. You also have a book that's probably print on demand that's called Metamorphosis
Yes.
Holistic Lifestyle Journal. Tell us quickly what that is.
Yeah, so we use that, lifestyle medicine when it comes to pediatrics is in its infancy, right? Because we cannot tell a 5-year-old you need to eat more veggies, you need to exercise, it is that right. It is harmful and unrealistic to do that, even with a 15-year-old who's not the one doing the grocery shopping. So our approach is to work with the parents and the family, and the journal is one of the ways that we help families plan and log so that then we can go over very non-judgmental ways how we can make those small changes at a time. So that's how the journal is designed, and it is print on demand, and it's available. The link is on my website. Mhm.
What a treasure. I mean, I love that the way that you live allows for all this creative embodiment of the principles that have served you well, that you see so useful for your patients.
Mhm.
And between books, retreats,
Yeah.
consults, online resources, surely anyone who's looking to learn more about an integrative and lifestyle approach to children with any sort of health
Right.
concern or
Yeah.
even preservation and with a healthy child. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank
What a
you.
treasure you've been. I am so touched by your beautiful smile, Dr. Adame, and thank you again for joining us.
Great to be here.